5 years ago, I bought this 2007 Lamborghini Murcielago LP640 and I had it totally repainted. The color changed from its original black to Verde Draco, one of my favorite colors that Lamborghini ever did. And when I did that, I did it at a very reputable shop that came highly recommended. They'd worked on Murcielagos before, and I knew that I could be confident in their work. And it was not cheap. At the time, it was $21,000 plus a few trim pieces and things that they would need to replace to do it the right way, pulling the glass out, taking the car all apart, and things like that. And they told me that it was going to take between 6 and 8 weeks, which generally, whenever you hear something like that, you don't want time to be the defining variable. So I knew it was going to be longer, and that was okay with me. I was expecting 4, maybe 5 months. Turned out it was 10. But when I picked the car up, it was everything that I've ever dreamt of. I loved the way the car looked, and I was very, very impressed with the quality of the work that the shop did. And I have to say that, since then, it's continued to impress me as an aftermarket paint job that could very easily pass for OEM. Now, on the other hand, my 1997 Lamborghini Diablo SV was recently painted for a television show. And I want to go over what that means, why it's different, and use that as a way to help you understand what it means to look for aftermarket paint work on a car and the imperfections that indicate that a car has been painted after it left the factory, because it has all of them. And the reason that it has all of them is because of the nature of television. One of the big differences between like a traditional cable television production and a YouTube show is that when you think about the shows that we've seen building cars, restoring cars, and things like that on cable television over the years, generally speaking, they're only going to devote 20 to 90 minutes to that car, depending on the extent of the project. But of course, when you follow along with your favorite content creator who is totally going from a ground up restoration, repair, reconstruction, whatever's going on with their car, in many cases, you're going to watch that car on their channel for hours and hours on end. And so the way they tend to do cars for cable and for streaming is very different and very, very fast. And so when my car was painted, I was not expecting a top quality paint job to rival what happened to the Murcielago. I knew that it was going to be a very different outcome, and it was. So let's look around the car and I'll show you exactly what I mean. Now, if you've ever taken a car to a dealership for a trade appraisal or just to sell it to them, you'll probably have seen their used car manager come out, walk around the car, touch different panels to try to figure out exactly what has happened in the car's history. And they're doing so because usually when you find aftermarket paintwork, you are finding evidence that it was previously damaged. It's not always just a color change or resprays for rock chips and things like that, but they also want to understand that as well. And that's a difference when you're trying to look at a car to buy in person versus looking online. But when you're shopping for a car online, of course, I recommend Autotempest.com. All the cars one search is their motto because they compile the results from all the major listing sites into one place to give you more shopping power and the ability to survey the entire market and know exactly where whatever car you're looking at kind of falls within the spectrum of pricing, condition, mileage, everything like that. It's where I start most of my mornings looking for my next questionable decision. But of course, it's then very important that you go and see the car in person or have someone see the car in person. And for me lately, the best way to do that, honestly, is just with the Lemon Squad. Wrench.com owns the Lemon Squad, and they have a nationwide network of qualified and trained mechanics that can put hands and eyes on a car, usually within 24 or 48 hours. It's very inexpensive, and when you're looking at a car that's a long way away, it is the best barrier between showing up and finding a car that maybe looks more like this than like this. But the reason, again, that this car looks the way that it does is the way that it was done and how fast it was done. So I'm going to talk you through all the different things that I see on this car to let me know that it's not that great of a paint job, so that when you look at your next car, you'll have the same ammunition for some shrewd negotiation. The first thing that you're going to look at when you're trying to figure out if a car has the original paint on it is, do the panels match? And the reason for that is that usually when you paint one panel, even though you've got the right paint code or whatever it is, you can't necessarily tell if it's going to match the panel next to it. So in this car's case, the doors are very yellow and the rest of the car is very orange. It's all painted the same shade of Arancio Atlas from Lamborghini's catalog, but because of the way that it was applied, it's very different. Now, the reason that the doors on both sides are so different, if you look at them next to the panels they come up against, is that the doors were painted removed. Now, that's usually a good idea because you can get around the edges, you can get the door jambs and things like that. But it appears to me that they painted them perpendicular to the rest of the car, meaning that the metallic flake laid differently on the doors than it did on the quarter panels, on the roof, and on the fenders. The next thing they'll look at is evidence that parts have been replaced. In this case, when they shipped the car back from the show, they broke the mirror out of it. You can't buy a Diablo mirror at the moment. I haven't found any used ones for sale, so I had to fix it with this Pep Boys repair. They also scraped the nose a good bit, and so at some point, I suppose that would need to be addressed. Now, once again, I was not upset by this because when I gave them the car, it was really badly repainted red as I'd shipped it in here from Japan. We had wrapped it pretty quick and dirty out at Glossit with some guys at SEMA, and so it was not going to get any worse, and it hasn't. It maybe wasn't as good as it could have been, but at the end of the day, I got what I paid for, which in this case was absolutely nothing. The next thing you're going to start to look at is the edge work, and that comes in two forms. The first is going to be overspray where it's not supposed to be. When they paint a car at the factory, they paint the panels, they install them, then they put on the trim and everything else. So you won't see overspray in most cases on places that should be seals, rubber, and things like that. When you just tape it off and paint it with the car already assembled, you're going to see more and more of that. And in this car's case, you see a lot. For instance, right here at the fastener for the rear deck lid, it looks like my 4-year-old taped it off and they didn't even get all the red. I don't have any idea how they abraded it to this extent, but it looks terrible because it wasn't done very, very well. That's consistent across the weather stripping. We've got overspray into the vents, overspray on the hood, just as you'd sort of imagine. Now, the other thing is the edge work on the panels. So if you ever watch somebody appraising a car, they'll usually walk around with their finger touching panels because when a panel has an OEM paint job, the edges of it will be very smooth. If you paint it after the fact, you can't do the finish work, the buffing and polishing on those panels because usually there's just not enough access. Now on the door, they did have access. They could have done better, but it's there. But on the rest of the panels, when you run your finger along them, you'll get a lot of texture, and that is a telltale sign that that panel has been painted. The next thing you're going to look at is the panel alignment. Hopefully, when a car is assembled at the factory, all the panels lined up, the door gaps are even, and things like that. That's not always the case with aftermarket work. You'll also be looking, as you're evaluating that, for turned bolts, compound, and things like that that might have gotten stuck in crevices or in hard-to-reach areas. And of course, this car has all of it. There's compound there. The deck lid fits like you just slammed it on and got it out the door, which they probably did. And all that is generally kind of to be expected. That's broken. Now, the next thing you're going to look at is the actual quality of the paintwork as it was laid down out of the gun. And the two main things you're looking at are texture and imperfections such as fisheyes. Now, fisheyes happen essentially when a drop of paint almost splashes in the rest of the paint, or clear coat in some cases, and you just noticed effectively a dot or just a kind of a wavy imperfection that looks like it's a little higher or a little lower than the rest of the paint around it. This is full of them. If you ever see this car at a car show and you want to look, you won't have to look very hard to find them. They are all over. The next is the texture. Now, a lot of cars from the factory, like a Mercedes-Benz, is going to have a lot of texture or orange peel in the paint. That means if you look at the reflection of a light on a surface of the car, it's not going to be crisp. It's going to have some waviness to it. That happens generally because of curing the car or painting the car in a suboptimal temperature, or just the general way that the manufacturer or the painter is applying the paint to the car. It's not the end of the world. Sometimes you can buff through it if it's in the clear coat and make the car a lot smoother. And when you smooth that clear coat out, you can sort of overcome a lot of flaws. And sometimes that in itself is the kind of telltale sign that the car has been painted, because the manufacturer may be known for having some texture in the paint, and you may look at a panel, only one, that is gorgeous and smooth and has been done really well. And so if it's too good, it's kind of the same as too bad in letting us know that the car may have been messed with a little bit. You'll also hear people describe trash in the paint, and that can be a little speck of dust or dirt that shows up. It could be a hair. You'd hope that would be avoided because they'd wear like masks and coveralls and things like that. But I'm not even sure this car was painted indoors, so let's just say that wasn't the expectation. You also see dirt that sometimes gets painted over, and you'll notice that. Now, in this car's case, this is probably brake dust, but it is underneath the clear coat. And so it'll be there forever. I disguise it by not cleaning this and getting more dirt on there. So, hey, you don't always have to worry about it. Now, since this car is carbon fiber, you can't really meter it. We've looked at paint meters on the Spiker, on the Bugatti, and things like that. And on the panels that are metal, in most cases, you can get a paint reading and you can tell if it's thicker or thinner and things like that. This car had so much paint on it prior, you'd never be able to really tell. But you do want to look at the panels and see if there is anything alarming about them. In this car's case, what I've recently had is that my window isn't holding where it's supposed to be. And when they took it apart and put it back on, I think they've misaligned something, and so it doesn't move as I would hope it does. All this stuff is generally fixable, and that's really what brings me to like, well, how bad is it? How much does it matter? In my case, since the rest of the car is all pretty terrible as well, I don't have carpets in it, the door cards fell out, it's been painted a bunch of times. I like the way that it looks, and I love even more than that, not having to worry about hitting something or changing it or making it any worse. And so I love how bad the car is, and so making it a little bit worse really doesn't matter, and it is more presentable. Now, what I observe is that when I show up at a car show in this car, people from 50 feet are like, holy cow, that's awesome. They get up to 20 feet, they're like, huh, and then they get up about 10 feet away and they're like, wow, who trusted this guy to actually own and operate this vehicle? And of course, I'm not entirely responsible for all of its flaws and issues, but that is a question that comes up. And usually to me, it just invites the, hey, look, I just don't care. The other day, I took my son to baseball practice in it, and another kid hit a foul ball, bounced right off the rear bumper. This kid's freaking out. Oh, I hit Mr. Ed's Lamborghini. I'm like, yeah, dude, hit it harder next time. Just don't hit the windshield. Because I just don't have to care because the car is already so messed up. And so it can grant you the license to enjoy a car even more. And that is the tone that I choose to take with it. But regardless, I still love the car. I've always wanted to have a metallic orange Lamborghini. And unfortunately, they usually command such a premium that I'm not going to pay up for it. So now I have one. I actually didn't paint this car orange because I was concerned that if it was imperfect, as I was chasing more perfection back then, it would bother me. And I had never seen a Verde Draco car in person, so I didn't have to worry about it. But this one is the right level of imperfect, even a little yellow in some places, but I still love it.